I'm Shannon.
Hi.
I I just said we're a little rusty on here. This is the first time we have recorded a podcast since before Christmas. And
Right.
here we just celebrated Easter. So we just took Jesus to Jesus holidays off.
Jesus to Jesus. I like
Jesus
that.
to Jesus
Yeah.
holidays we took
We
off.
took some
So
time getting ourselves um in a right state of mind, maybe. I don't
we
know. I'm
did.
just kidding.
Well, and we kept saying we need to record, we need to record. And we are like, what are we gonna
Yeah.
record?
Yeah.
And what we're recording, I should back up, is Hopeful Hearts podcast. So, welcome to anyone who's listening or watching. Hopeful Hearts Ministry aids in long term recovery for survivors of trauma and abuse. Shannon Carr is the founder, and I'm Tamara Lexo. I'm the executive director, and we're here to talk about things today.
Things, all the things. No.
Things. So,
Things that
we,
believing in what we don't see
yeah,
or
or
know
we
much
haven't heard of.
about. Right.
So, we got this idea because last week we were hanging out. I
Oh,
went to
do a
your house.
disclaimer. Do a disclaimer.
Oh, I know, I always do. So we are going to be talking about things today that might not be suitable for little ears. It could be hard to listen to if you have not dealt with all your stuff from your past. So just be aware of that. That we will be talking about some serious, very serious things today. So you might want to wait until little ears are not around. So
Okay.
I went over to Shannon's house last week, one afternoon, and we were at the end of the workday. And we went to have some wine and we ordered some pizza and had some snacks, and we were going to watch a movie together. And my son texted and asked if we were watching the space shuttle launch. And I had no idea what he was talking about because apparently we were sending people to the moon. And
Well,
Shannon and I were
actually, in
like,
all reality, we thought it was
yeah,
sending him to the moon, but they
yeah,
were
we're
going around the
around
moon.
the moon.
But yeah,
But still,
yeah,
it's a big deal.
yeah.
And we had no idea. We were clueless. And I said, that kind of makes me sad because when we did send people to the moon in the 60s, it was a huge deal. And everybody stayed home and watched their television. And I mean, it was a big, momentous thing. And you and I both talked about how we both watched the Challenger um,
Mm.
and that explosion, and then we saw the other shuttle that exploded as it was coming back into our orbit
Hmm.
after they had been in space. And so watching a space shuttle launch can be I have a little PTSD about that, but it's a big deal. It's a really big deal. And how did we not know that it was happening? Now, I know
Hmm.
that part of it for me is I just don't watch the news that much anymore. Um, it's so negative and it feels so biased all the time that I don't keep up with the news like I should. Um,
Hmm.
I'll I'll see things on Facebook or Instagram and I'm like, oh, I need to know more about that. So maybe I'll go to Google and Google something and um, just try to see what everybody's talking about. My husband gets alerts from USA Today and he'll tell me things sometimes and I'm like, okay. But he doesn't follow the news a lot either. Um, so I guess if your algorithm on your social medias was not about the space shuttle, then you could have easily missed it like we did. But
Hmm.
well, or we almost did, but because my son was super interested in it, and then your son was super interested in it. So you were texting your oldest son, asking him questions.
Right.
And we watched it, and it's very moving. It's fascinating to see how the space shuttles are so different now than what they were when we were younger. And Um,
Hmm.
just that they sent four human beings
Hmm.
into space. Like that's
But
huge.
it's funny because of course, I'm going to always bring up the morbid or bring up,
Hmm.
and my son's very much, Ryan is very much into NASA and the space, exploration and all of
Hmm.
that. And, he's currently in medical school, and he wants to go into the medical program for NASA. Or it's something he might would like to, see if he could get into that
Right.
at some point. Um, but and so it has been something I've been hearing about. He talked about I used to live in uh the Deer Park area, which was not 20 minutes from where
Hmm.
NASA is in Houston. And I would take my boys to go and they have a great play area for
Oh
kids,
yeah,
but you could
we
also
do.
tour and see all the things.
Hmm.
And so it was a really cool, thing to do back in the day. And still to this day, I'm sure
Yeah.
it's very cool. I'm just thinking about when they were kids. But when we talk about space launches, and as Tamara and I, as we were watching it, all I kept thinking, and this is what made me say, I was like, it kind of gives me PTSD. I have PTSD from other
Yeah.
things, but on this one in particular, is, I remember exactly where I was when
Hmm.
the Challenger, when that, explosion
Me
happened.
too. Me too.
And, I believe, and I want to say I was in seventh grade. I want to say I was in middle school. Maybe I was in
Hmm.
sixth grade. I can't quite remember, but um, I just remember where I was watching it and all of that
Hmm.
happening, and it was crazy. And then the second one, I mean,
Hmm.
that went over. Unfortunately, aspects of that went over like where I was
Yeah.
at SFA and Nacogdoches, like here in Texas, like
Yeah.
that was around here. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't like talking about that. It's horrible, and,
No.
and I know we already gave our
I
disclaimer,
know.
but it's like, there was things that were found
Right. Right.
from that, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so that it's just so hard. So now it's like, and when we were watching it, this is horrible, but I will admit that I just kept watching it like, please don't blow up, please don't blow up, please
Yes.
don't blow
Me
up. Like
too. Me too.
I don't want to see this again. Like I don't want to see this happen. And then, so it makes my heart hurt a little bit or like get anxious when Ryan's like, no, I would love to go up in space and I would love to, be there.
Mm.
And, I don't even know if that's what would happen. Maybe he would just be the
Yeah.
doctor down here for them or whatever. But
Yeah.
still, um, it's like, oh, and how do we overcome this fear, right? I mean, that
Yeah.
that encompasses everything when something major and traumatic has happened to us. And um,
Hmm.
but anyway, but what got us on the topic of talking about what we were doing today was just, mentioning how, you know, it's how do you believe it unless you see it kind of thing,
Right.
or
Right.
um and it's
Like
just
there's
it's
all
really
kinds of
difficult.
conspiracy theories about whether or not we really went to the moon the first time, and people try to say, "Oh, they just did that on the soundstage," and you know, and and it's like, no, but you saw it on you saw it happen, but yet people still don't believe, and so it's super easy if you haven't seen something to go, that didn't happen. There's no
Hmm.
way. There's no way
Hmm.
that happened. Or it didn't happen like that. There's no way it could have happened like that.
Well, it's a great way to explain how something so traumatic seems so outlandish, right? Like you just, like you said, like you can't fathom
Hmm.
seeing it or thinking that it actually could take place. And so then that leads into we were like, well, what should we talk about? How are we going to break
Yeah.
open season? What season are we on? Three now? Four?
Or
This is four. We're on season four.
season
Wow. I
4.
can't even believe we've been doing it this long.
I
Sorry,
know.
guys. I'm just kidding. Thanks for
Right.
staying with us all this time.
Right.
Um, but this is April. We had to start. We had to get going because April is Sexual Assault Awareness and Child Abuse Prevention Month. And it's never, neither one of them are topics that anybody ever wants to talk about.
Mhm.
That's probably our number one challenge. In But God keeps us going because we're in our 15th year
Right.
with Hopeful Hearts Ministry, and clearly we have many people that continue to call on us for help and
Mhm.
support and guidance and direction and care and
Yeah.
concern and all the things, right? And so, but in regards to a lot of people just don't want to think about it. It's too bad, it's too much, it's too
Yeah.
horrible. Um, I am a sexual assault survivor, so is Tamara. Um, molestation, assault. I mean, it's
Mhm.
all encompassed, right?
Mhm.
And I have lived through violent rapes. And and even for me, it's something that, like, it's hard for me to listen to other people's stories, if that makes any
Yeah.
sense. In the sense of, like, wow, like, there's always going to be a story that can outdo another story, if that could
Oh,
be done.
yeah.
Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
I
Um,
do. Just when we think we've heard it all,
right.
someone unleashes something else and it horrifies you and breaks your heart.
Yeah, absolutely. And then child abuse, prevention. I think the greatest thing that we do here is to talk
Mhm.
about it and to talk about the
Mhm.
fact that it happens. And that is a way of preventing, right? Or trying to help prevent it from happening. But the biggest thing that we can do to prevent it from happening is getting help for those, and leading people that have been through childhood abuse to get help so that they don't still continue the cycle.
Right.
Because I'm pretty certain 100% of the time a child abuser has been abused.
I,
And don't quote me
I
on that. I'm not
no, but
100% on that, but
I
from
feel
my
like
own experience of working with them,
the
that's what I see.
statistically that feels like a really safe bet, because
Right.
of everybody that we have talked to, everybody that we know that is an abuser, it's like, I think about my abuser, and I have said this before. I'm like, he was a child as well, but older than me. But somebody had to teach him to do the things that he did. I mean, you don't just a child doesn't just come up with some of that on their own. You know,
Mhm.
it's a cycle that, unfortunately, it kind of reminds me, just of how many friends I had growing up that their parents smoked, and they
Mm.
said they never ever smoke because they hated that their parents smoked, and then all of them ended up smoking. Um, it's like you could be abused and think there's no way I would ever do this, but if you've not been taught the proper coping
Mhm.
skills, deal with anger, to deal with rage, that pattern will repeat.
Or even to tamper down. I mean, I'm just speaking from,
Hmm.
having been molested and
Yeah.
having worked with people that have been through different things. There's different reactions and responses, and some of that, especially if it comes from early childhood, can be
Yes.
a response of acting out sexually, right?
Yeah.
And then as they get older, men and women, I'm not just
Hmm.
speaking of men, or
Yeah.
this is for women too,
Hmm.
specifically, really also for women,
Hmm.
is that um, they get into their later adulthood or teens or
Hmm.
whatever and 20s and start, like, they can't find pleasure. I hate to say
Right.
it like this, unless they're either treated a certain way or could treat somebody else a
Yeah.
certain way, or, you know,
Hmm.
that certain things happen that aren't necessarily healthy. And that
Right.
is how abuse can be perpetuated,
Hmm.
um, because as much as they don't want maybe to do that, it is
Hmm.
what is normal for them, and they've
That's
never
normal.
fully gotten out of that. And I mean, and I'm about I'm going to say it out loud just because I feel like maybe some might understand this, but that used to be a great fear of mine, and it's an aspect of Hopeful Hearts of why I started this as well, not just to help and heal others, but to be
Mhm.
so transparent with what I've personally been through, the healing process, and just this need to I feel as if as long as we could talk out and talk about the things and even be transparent in my own failings and
Mhm.
the things that I have done wrong, because clearly I am not an angel. But it can keep me accountable. And it is
Yeah.
that, not that I ever felt that I had this need to be abusive to anybody, but
No.
what if something I do comes across the wrong way? And maybe I
Mhm.
didn't realize, not now, so much now that I'm in my 50s,
Yeah.
but I'm talking about like when I was in my 20s or
Yeah.
early 30s, and maybe I did or said something because it was what I was used to,
Right.
right? And I didn't
Right.
know any better. But now I
Hmm.
know better. But
Yeah.
I feel like the need to always be able to talk about it that way, it holds me accountable, because you just never know what makes somebody fall, if you will.
Right. Right.
Does that make any sense? I hope
Oh,
I'm making sense.
absolutely.
But
Absolutely. So you and I both just read a book. Well, I don't know if you finished. No, I think you did. That If You
okay.
Tell.
Oh yes, I did finish it. Oh my gosh. Ah,
Mm.
what a good example. I'm glad you brought that up.
Right. Right.
That was hard to listen to.
It
Who
was.
wrote that? If you tell, it was written
Yeah. Let
by
me
like
look.
a
Let me
ghostwriter,
look.
right? Or not a
Um.
ghostwriter, but someone that
hmm,
is
Greg Olson. Greg Olson wrote it.
okay. Yeah, he writes these true stories, and he does very good. Like he interviews them, like the people involved in the whole story, as best as can
Hmm.
be, and then forms it into kind of a timeline and a readable, like the beginning to the end, right?
Yeah.
Of how this horrible story could happen.
Yeah. And this story we discovered was on the show Snapped. They did an episode about it, which um
Did
this
you
lady
watch
did.
it?
No,
I haven't
no.
watched it.
You said you did or you didn't?
I didn't watch it yet.
Yeah.
No.
She didn't snap, so I don't. It's weird to me that they would have it on there, but because she was an abuser, like from the time she was a child, she
Mm-hmm.
abused everyone around her until she was old. But she had abused her children, and she abused the people in her life, and um, she lied constantly, constantly.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was wrapped up in a lie. Um, and the daughters would even say sometimes they would be just awestruck that their mom would create these elaborate lies. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, why not? If you're going to lie about it, just keep it simple. Why make it so,
Right.
you know,
And I
so
think that,
elaborate?
in all honesty, I have to take back my 100%, because
Mm,
in knowing her story, because you hear from her stepmom, her dad, like
yeah.
she wasn't abused, right? Was she? I don't remember the beginning. Was she
Um,
abused? I'm gonna have
her
to look
mother,
into that. We'll
maybe
come
now I'm
back
gonna
to
have to
you.
look it up again, but I think maybe her mother did something to because she was raised by the stepmother and the
Right.
grandmother, right?
Okay, so we have to look into that. But
Yeah, we'll have to
she
look
just
into
was
it.
she just was evil. She was
She
a
was
mean person.
sadistic.
And
She was sadistic. Like she took great pleasure in harming people. Like she planned it out and went to these extravagant measures to really um, destroy people. I mean, it's not your typical abuse story,
Hmm.
abuser story. It's
And it was one very hard for me to listen to. I finally finished, I was listening to it on Audible and I finally finished the whole thing, but it took me a long time just because
mhm,
of the nature of how. And I mean, it was just degrading. And she would make
mhm.
them be naked and go outside and in the
Roll in the
freezing, like
snow.
below freezing weather and
Yeah.
get in the mud and
Hmm.
what they called wallowing.
Yeah.
That she would put water on them, at negative
Hmm.
0-degree weather,
Yeah.
and they wouldn't eat. And she would take away their ability to use the restroom inside and a normal, toilet, and
Hmm.
they would have to wear their like or not wear clothes at all, like literally walk around
Hmm.
each other, brothers and sisters, um, while she was eating and drinking and
Yeah.
fully clothed. But if anybody's interested in hearing or looking into what we're doing, it was called If You Tell, but it's about Michelle Notick,
Yes.
Noteck. And
Yeah.
when I was searching it up, it's under like the Raymond killings. And I want to say that's in Washington State, I believe, but the
Yeah, I
Raymond
think it was.
killings. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and the interesting thing, just to get back on the topic of what we're talking about,
Mhm.
is, you hear the story from all the interviews done by the daughters that were abused, and each
Mhm.
one daughter was abused way more than the other. And then she
Uh-huh.
finally, when one daughter finally escaped and got away. um, sorry, something just happened outside. I know you couldn't hear it. Sorry. Uh, there was like some major sirens going on. Um, that people were like, we had no idea.
Yeah.
And that makes me horribly sad because I think because they were saying how they were going to school smelling a BO. They had to
Yeah.
wear the same clothes because their mother wouldn't like let them
Hmm.
wear any of their other clothes. And she did it on purpose to make them
Right.
feel um embarrassed or ashamed. And
Hmm.
because according to their mother, Michelle Shelley Nodick, that,
Really? Yeah.
you've done this to me, so I'm gonna, I want you to be ashamed. I want you to
Hmm.
feel, horrible. I want them to look at you like you're
Right.
nothing. And I think just what makes me horribly sad is that nobody clued into that at the
Yeah.
school,
Yeah,
you
because
know?
this was in the 90s, right? Like 90s and early 2000s. And these, it's in a time where I feel like teachers were really being trained to notice that kind of stuff. But these girls were, um, was it three girls or four? It was three girls, and then they had a cousin that was a
They
boy.
had a
And
cousin that they considered like a brother, Shane.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
then she would take in this, and the
It took in
unbelievable,
people.
took
Like
in
she took
people that
in like
went.
friends, but they were really people that were like on kind of the cusp of society. Like they didn't have close family, but what family they did, she was able to ostracize them and get them away so that she could take these people into her house and abuse them in her home. Just for the what? Like just
Mhm.
for the fun of it? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. It was like, but I thought it was interesting. The youngest daughter, just because of the way the girls were spread out, even as she got older, she didn't know that the older ones had gone through the abuse that they had. And so when the older girls were out of the house and the younger one was there being abused, she didn't want to tell them because she was embarrassed of what she was going through and putting up with, quote unquote. Like um but because they had all been trained to never ever talk about it.
Mhm.
These three sisters had all endured the same thing,
Hmm.
essentially, but didn't talk about it until the youngest one was like upper high school age.
Hmm.
Because it's like, well, because she didn't see it when she was little, she didn't think they had gone through it. And then they were out of the house and they didn't see what she was going through, but they would
Hmm.
call and talk to her and she would say, "Oh no, I'm fine. I'm fine."
Hmm.
And since they didn't
But
see it, it was believable.
the other aspect of that though is if you're brought up in it, then
Hmm.
it's and you don't know anything else.
Yeah.
So you feel that, well, she's meaner maybe than other parents, but I guess they weren't as bad as me. And so they didn't get,
Hmm.
everybody else must also receive these same types of punishments, right? It wasn't
Right.
until they got older, like more in their mid to late teens, that they started
Hmm.
realizing, I don't like, I need to get away. I need to get
Yeah.
away. But she would do this from when they were little
Yeah.
and do horrible, atrocious things to
Hmm.
them. And they felt like it was normal. And that is how, you know, people wonder, well, how is it that these kids don't say something when they're at school? Well,
Hmm.
the other crazy thing about this that we should mention is that they love their parent. And
Oh
these
yeah.
girls still loved their mom
Hmm.
even to the end, even when
Yeah.
they escaped, they were still weary of saying anything bad about her
Yeah.
or even
And the
turning her
younger one
in.
was still helping her when she was in jail. It was like putting money in her account and sending her things like care packages
Hmm.
while her mom was in jail for abusing her. Like, I mean,
Hmm.
and other things, so many other things. But
Well, she killed people. Let's put that out
yeah,
there too. These
yeah.
these other wayward people that she took in and mind,
Hmm.
controlled. It was kind of like her own little cult. And then she
Yeah,
literally abused them to death, to their
right.
death. And the girls, their daughters, you know still, but they it's not that they liked these people being there, it's just the
Hmm.
abuse that they would take on was less when she
Yeah,
had somebody else to put that kind of effort
right.
into, if you will.
And the girls
um
knew that was wrong. They felt like they were like, I hated that my mom would focus her attention, but at least if her attention was on the other person, then it wasn't so much on me. And
mhm,
and that's a normal human response. That's a survival response to say, okay, I know this is wrong, but I have to protect myself,
mhm,
which is another reason why sometimes people don't talk because they're afraid. And it's like I have to protect myself from
mhm,
what from the unknown, like
mhm,
it's bad now, but it could be worse. I'm guessing,
mhm.
we don't know what we don't know kind of thing.
And even in one family, and I can unfortunately speak into this just with my own upbringing, or
Hmm.
like I know some of my cousins had an uncle that was I mean, now that he has passed, I've come to find out some things that were way worse than what I would have ever thought, right?
Yeah.
But I don't negate it, or I don't disclaim it, because
Hmm.
I've heard so
Hmm.
much, and I could see and I know their responses and reactions, and I know that they definitely have been hurt. But even within their own nucleus of a family, because things are different with each child, and then that they don't speak to one another or talk it out, then it's just there, everybody has a different view, right? Everybody
Yeah.
has their own side or the own way that they
Hmm.
look at it. And like within my own family, my
Hmm.
father was different to my sister than to me, than to my
Hmm.
younger sister, than to my
Yeah.
brother. And so we all came from the same household, but you know whereas maybe he wasn't like as emotionally abusive to me
Hmm.
or whatever, but he may have been worse more on my sister, right? My older
Hmm.
sister, or, something to that
Yeah.
effect. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of makes me sad.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um,
And I think about some people that I've helped through the years, and I think
mhm,
about one situation where, you know, a a situation of abuse had happened,
mhm,
molestation, that kind of thing, but the others were out of the house or weren't in the house, something like that, but they weren't
yeah,
around, so they weren't a part of that.
mhm,
And so now there's this obligation, like what we were saying, how they still love the
yeah,
parent, they still love the abuser, they still love them because
mhm,
they were still their caretaker, their nurturer,
mhm,
and they can carry that forever, and
mhm,
feel this sense of guilt and shame when, maybe that person's sick. And then the other siblings who it didn't happen to or weren't around when it happened are
mhm.
like, why, give you guilt or shame because you're not helping, you're not being a part
Right,
of the life. And um, again, we just don't know what we don't know. And I just think
right.
it's so important. The biggest key is to have that voice. I have a
Mhm.
voice, right? To be able
Yeah.
to talk it out and to talk about it and be believed and to be heard.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, I think a lot of times these abuse stories will tear families apart because someone doesn't know, or was it didn't happen to them, and so they don't want to believe that it's happened to someone else, and it can cause major rifts between cousins, between siblings, between even husbands and wives. There's someone I worked with years ago that her father had abused her sexually, and when she finally got the courage to tell her mom didn't want to believe it, and the brother didn't want to believe it because it hadn't happened to him. Um, and so the mom kicked the girl out. And, um, it's in this age that we are in now where so much is created online. You see so much AI stuff, and sometimes it's easy to go, oh, that's AI. I can tell. But sometimes it's hard to tell. And um, we're taught to be skeptics of so much that's in the news and what's on social media, and don't believe everything you read and don't believe everything you see. And so when we hear these stories that are so extreme, sometimes it's like, uh, okay, um, but what I want people to hear is that at Hopeful Hearts, we always are here to listen, and we don't come with judgment. Our first response is always going to be listening with an open heart, because Shannon and I both, and people on our board, people that, Lynn that works with us, um, we have all been in the position before of having to tell our story and praying that someone is listening and believing us. We've all been questioned, and we know what that feels like. And so when you come to us, we are not a place of judgment. We're a quiet landing space.
Mhm.
We listen to that. But it's also, I see so much now in society where people tell their story, and there's so much victim shaming now. It's ridiculous how much victim shaming you see online, and it makes
Mhm.
people not want to tell their story, to not want to share, because they don't want to be called out for what they did wrong or what they did to make it happen, or any of that other malarkey. But
Mhm.
it's just it doesn't feel safe a lot of times. And at Hopeful Hearts, we are a safe place
Mhm.
for people to share their story. So,
Yeah. I think, and that's key. And I just, if you are listening to this and it's really resonating and you've just never talked about it, my full memories of everything that happened when I was really young did not come back until I was 40 or
Mm-hmm.
41 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And, I remember because I was writing something now, had been in therapy like 5 or 6 years before, and I had gone through some kind of hypnotherapy, which apparently in the session, there were some aspects that came out and I remember specifically the session, but I do believe that God protects us sometimes from certain memories until
Mm-hmm.
you're ready. And I
Yeah.
obviously wasn't ready.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a situation that I would not have been psychologically ready, I think, to
Mm-hmm.
handle my full truth, even though I knew it was probably like I had an idea. I knew, but I
Mm-hmm.
just didn't have the memories. And then they came back. But I remember still then going and like to certain people that were supposed to be very close and
Yeah.
important to me and
Mm-hmm.
saying I have had these memories, like now I know,
Mm-hmm.
and now I'm heartbroken. And I remember hearing, are you sure, really, like, or
Mm-hmm.
even, oh well, yeah, I figured. And it's like, no, like this, I feel like this just happened to me again,
Yeah.
and now I need someone to say, oh my God. I honestly, if I could have redone that whole time of telling, if I could have told somebody what I needed in that moment,
Mm-hmm.
I needed somebody to reach out and to hug me and go, I am so sorry.
Yeah.
Tell me what you want, but tell me what you feel comfortable telling me. Talk to me. And instead, I was met with resistance because either A, I just can't even imagine it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to think about that kind of hurt or pain, or I don't want to think about
Yes.
that evil. I don't want to imagine that that would have happened to you,
Mm-hmm.
or, another side where, oh, you're just being dramatic, or maybe you're making this
Mm-hmm.
up, or maybe, are you sure you really did have those memories? Maybe you're jumping
Mm-hmm.
on the coattails of something else, or, whatever, right?
Yeah.
I've probably got both
Yeah.
sides of that coin. And all I needed was someone to just believe and then
Yes.
hug me and tell me I'm sorry.
Yes. Yes.
And that's,
And
I
sending you a
guess, what
virtual
Tamara and
hug
I
right
try
now.
to do. Thank you, Tamara. You give me many hugs that you're
I
my
know.
Tamara.
I
Um,
know. But that is
and
what we try to
that's
do
what we're here
because
for.
we want to
Mhm.
be that safe place because sometimes when memories come back, you have this feeling in you. It's like, I gotta get this out. I gotta get this story out. And you can end up trauma dumping on the wrong person and they don't have the right reaction because they weren't expecting it. They weren't expecting, or maybe they love you so much and they can't even fathom the the horrific instance that you've gone through, the horrific things that have happened to you, and they close up and they're like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. It's and then that ends up hurting your feelings. So it's I may be speaking from experience on that, but because I've done that. I mean, I where something came back and it was like I got to tell somebody, and you said blah, 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 and then people are like, uh,
Oh, what
I
do I
don't
do with that?
know, I don't know what to do with that. Well, Shannon and I know what to do with that, so we are here for you, like I said, to be that safe place, and we have heard a lot, so there's not a lot that we can't fathom, but we want you to have a safe opportunity to share your story, um, to process it. And if it's more than what we can help you process, we have lots of highly qualified therapists that we know and love that we can recommend, um, that that are ready and willing to help hopeful hearts survivors on any given day. So we
Or if you're
want,
not here and where we are, because a lot of the
yeah,
people we know will do online therapy as well. But
yes,
we also can look at, if you have insurance and you want to go through insurance and do a
Mhm.
therapist, we can help you look through their
Yeah.
qualifications because we know, certain things that might be good, if you need to go through EMDR, if you need
Mhm.
certain types of therapy, that could always be helpful and we're
Yeah.
happy to help figure that out in itself
Yeah.
too. So
If you'd like to learn more about Hopeful Hearts Ministry, you can go to Hopeful Hearts Ministry, one hopeful, multiple hearts, one ministry. Hopeful Hearts Ministry.org. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. We are here for you, and we want to be that safe place for you.
Tamara, share real quick before we sign
Sure.
off. And I know some of this is here in person, but I just want to
Mhm.
let people know because we have a lot of people that are close by that listen in. And
Mhm.
then if we have enough response for anybody that wants to maybe follow along online, then we might could do so.
Yeah,
But we have a upcoming Bible study that we're doing.
we
We have a
do. So,
retreat in the works. If you want to
yes.
come and fly down
So,
here and
starting Thursday, April the 16th, we are doing a Jenny Allen Bible study. It's called The Lie You Don't Know You Believe. And it's how Jesus fought the devil in the book of Matthew, how Jesus fought the devil when he was in the wilderness and the devil was trying to defeat him with lies. Um, this is a 6 week study. It's going to be here at my house, but if there's enough interest, we can maybe live stream it too. So um, I really want to encourage everybody. There's a workbook that you can order. It's on Amazon. She has a book that she wrote, but then there's a workbook, and you're going to need the workbook it breaks it out by sessions, and there's a little bit of homework. But we would love to have anybody and everybody come join us on that. And we are working on a retreat for November, so we'll get more information about that out to you as it comes. So I want to
yeah.
thank you for listening and for tuning in today. Appreciate you and like and subscribe and all that stuff. Share with your friends because that helps our algorithm get up so that more people who need help from Hopeful Hearts Ministry can receive it. So thanks, Shannon.
Thank
Happy
you.
season 4.
Same. Very
Bye.
excited. Bye.